The sun rose slowly over the vast desert, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The wind moved gently across the rocky plains, carrying with it the dry scent of sagebrush and earth warmed by the early morning light. In this quiet, untamed land, life moved at its own pace, shaped by the harshness of nature and the strength of those who lived here. Among them was a woman of Apache heritage, known in her community for her quiet wisdom and strong will. She had spent her life learning the ways of the land, moving through the world with a watchful eye and a cautious heart. Her life had not been easy. She had faced loss, hardship, and challenges that had left marks on her body and soul. Yet she carried herself with dignity and resilience. On the other side of the desert, a cowboy rode into town, his horse kicking up dust as it moved across the rough terrain. He was a man of courage and independence, the kind who lived by his own rules and faced danger without hesitation. His life had been shaped by hard work, long days on horseback, and nights spent under the open sky. The cowboy was no stranger to risk, and his reputation had been built on daring decisions and a willingness to stand alone when necessary. But even someone so confident could not predict the twists life sometimes offered. That morning, fate brought the cowboy to the outskirts of the Apache woman's land. A sudden desert storm had swept through the area, turning the dry soil into patches of mud and whipping sand into the air. The wind howled with an almost human anger, and the cowboy struggled to keep his horse steady as the first drops of rain fell. He knew he needed shelter quickly, or he might not survive the storm unscathed. At that moment, the Apache woman appeared in the doorway of her small home, her eyes sharp and wary. She had noticed the approaching storm and the lone figure struggling against it. Her instincts told her that he needed help, but her heart urged caution. The desert had taught her that appearances could be deceiving, and that trust had to be earned. Yet, despite the uncertainty, she stepped forward and called out to him, offering a place to take refuge. The cowboy hesitated, unsure if he could trust this stranger. But the storm left him no choice, and he guided his horse toward her home, grateful for her presence. As he dismounted, the woman's gaze studied him carefully, noting the wear on his clothing, the scratches on his arms, and the tired lines etched into his face. She did not speak immediately, letting silence fill the space between them. In the desert, silence was not empty. It was a language of its own, one that revealed more than words ever could. Inside her home, the warmth of a fire greeted him, and the smell of herbs and dry wood filled the small space. She handed him a blanket without a word, her movements deliberate and calm. The cowboy accepted it with a nod, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. It was a simple gesture, but in that moment, it carried trust and kindness, two things that could mean the difference between life and death in the harsh desert. As the storm raged outside, the two sat in quiet companionship. The woman, careful and observant, asked small questions about his journey, while the cowboy answered with honesty tempered by modesty. He spoke of the open plains he had crossed, the towns he had visited, and the challenges he had faced. She listened, her eyes reflecting the flickering firelight, showing a mix of curiosity and understanding. Days passed, and the storm eventually gave way to calm skies. The desert returned to its usual rhythm, the sun climbing high, and the wind whispering through the rocks and shrubs. During this time, the cowboy and the Apache woman found themselves learning from each other. He helped with chores around her home, repairing fences, fetching water, and tending to the small garden that provided her with herbs and vegetables. She, in turn, shared her knowledge of the land, teaching him how to read the sky for signs of weather, how to find water in hidden places, and how to move quietly through the desert without disturbing its delicate balance. Through these shared experiences, a fragile trust began to grow. Neither spoke of their pasts in detail, but their actions and the small moments of kindness communicated volumes. The cowboy admired her strength and the way she moved with quiet confidence. He noticed the careful way she handled her tasks, her patience, and her ability to remain calm even when challenges arose. The woman, meanwhile, saw in him a man who respected her space who did not try to control or change her, and who was willing to take risks to do the right thing. Evenings were spent around the fire, where stories were exchanged in bits and pieces. The woman spoke of the land, of her ancestors, and of lessons learned from a life shaped by both beauty and hardship. The cowboy shared tales of the open range, of storms survived, and of the moments that had tested his courage. In these exchanges, a connection deepened, a sense that, despite coming from very different worlds, they were both shaped by resilience, independence, and a quiet determination to endure. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the desert was bathed in soft twilight, the cowboy noticed something different in her demeanor. There was a weight in her eyes, a shadow of pain that she did not speak aloud. He did not push for answers, understanding that some wounds were not meant to be shared lightly. Instead, he simply remained present, offering a steady, calm presence that spoke of safety and patience. The Apache woman, sensing his genuine respect and patience, felt a spark of something she had not felt in a long time, a sense that perhaps she could let someone in, even if only a little. Life had taught her caution, but it had also taught her that trust, when earned, could be a source of strength rather than vulnerability. She began to see the cowboy not just as a visitor or a stranger, but as someone who might understand her world without trying to change it. By the end of the first week, the storm had become a distant memory, but its effects lingered in the way they had come to rely on each other. The cowboy had proven himself not just in action, but in patience, respect, and quiet understanding. The Apache woman, in turn, had allowed herself to see that connection could exist even in the harshest places, that shared experiences could build bridges across worlds and histories. The desert, with all its beauty and danger, had brought them together, and in its silence and vastness, they had discovered the beginnings of a bond that neither had anticipated. Both were aware that their lives would not be simple, that challenges would come, and that the past would sometimes cast long shadows. Yet, in the midst of the desert's quiet grandeur, they had found a moment of understanding, a fragile, precious moment that promised the possibility of trust, friendship, and perhaps something deeper. As night fell, the fire crackled gently, and the desert stretched endlessly beyond the walls of the small home. The cowboy and the Apache woman sat together, neither speaking much, both feeling the subtle shift in their relationship. There was no rush, no pressure, just the recognition that life, with all its risks and uncertainties, had brought them together for a reason. In that quiet desert night, two souls from different worlds had crossed paths, beginning a journey that would test courage, trust, and the strength to reveal the parts of themselves they had long kept hidden. And so, the first part of their story closed, not with a grand event or dramatic gesture, but with the soft, steady pulse of connection, a connection born of shared space, mutual respect, and the unspoken understanding that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could change the course of a life forever. The days following the storm passed in quiet routine. The desert had returned to its calm rhythm, the wind softly brushing against the rocks, carrying the scent of sage and dry earth. The cowboy and the Apache woman had settled into a pattern of work and companionship. They shared small tasks around the home and in the surrounding land. And while words were sometimes few, their actions spoke volumes. There was a rhythm to their days, a gentle flow that neither rushed nor forced connection. But beneath the calm, both carried memories and wounds that shaped them. The Apache woman had lived through events that left deep marks, physical scars from accidents and hardships, and emotional ones from moments of loss and betrayal. She rarely spoke of them. For years, she had learned that showing weakness could invite judgment, and the world had taught her to protect herself. She carried her scars silently, wearing them as shields as much as reminders of survival. The cowboy, too, had his past. He had faced challenges that tested him in ways that words could not fully capture. He had learned to rely on courage, skill, and persistence. Yet, even he understood the weight of carrying invisible wounds. He respected the woman's silence, sensing that her story was not something to be hurried or demanded. One evening, As the sun dipped low and painted the sky with streaks of gold and crimson, the two sat outside on the porch. The desert stretched endlessly before them, its quiet beauty both calming and humbling. The cowboy had been repairing a fence all day, and his hands were covered in dust and scratches. The Apache woman had been tending the small herb garden, her movements steady and deliberate. For a long time, neither spoke. The only sounds were the distant cries of birds returning to roost and the whispering wind among the rocks. Finally, she broke the silence. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, carrying a vulnerability she rarely allowed herself to show. "I have scars," she said quietly. "Not just on the outside, but on the inside too." She looked at him, eyes searching, as if asking silently whether he could handle what she carried. The cowboy did not flinch. He met her gaze steadily, sensing the gravity in her words. He had learned in his life that scars, whether visible or hidden, were not signs of weakness, but proof of endurance and courage. He nodded gently, encouraging her to continue without pressing for details. She took a deep breath and rolled up her sleeve. The scars on her arms were pale lines against her skin, some old, some newer, each telling a story she had rarely shared with anyone. He looked without judgment, only with quiet attention, understanding that this was an act of immense trust. The desert wind seemed to pause around them, as if giving space for the moment to hold its weight. "I've faced things most people don't understand," she said softly. "I've survived when I thought I couldn't, and I've lost people I loved more than I can say. These marks, they are reminders that I am still here, still standing." The cowboy nodded, keeping his voice calm and steady. "You're strong," he said. "You survived. That's what matters. I don't see just the scars. I see the person who faced everything and kept going." She studied him, a mixture of relief and disbelief in her eyes. People often turned away when they saw her scars, or they asked questions with pity or fear. But here was someone who simply acknowledged her strength, someone who saw her without trying to fix her or diminish her experiences. She felt a small, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, she could let herself trust someone. Over the following days, their bond deepened. The woman began to share fragments of her story, though she still chose what to reveal and what to keep private. She spoke of childhood lessons learned from elders who had taught her resilience, of moments when she had been tested by nature, and of times when she had faced human cruelty. Each story was accompanied by a gesture, a pause, or a quiet sigh, and the cowboy listened without interruption, giving her the space to speak at her own pace. In return, he shared pieces of his own life. He spoke of nights spent alone under the stars, of storms he had weathered both in nature and in life, and of mistakes that had taught him humility. He did not tell every detail, but his openness encouraged her to continue revealing her own history. It was a careful dance of trust, each step measured but meaningful. One evening, after a long day of work in the desert, they sat together watching the sun set. She spoke more freely, allowing herself to show the emotions that usually stayed hidden behind her stoic exterior. She told him about moments when she had feared she would not survive, about times when she had felt utterly alone. And yet, for each tale of struggle, there was also a story of endurance, of courage, of triumph over circumstances that seemed impossible. The cowboy did not respond with judgment or advice. Instead, he offered quiet presence, a steady reminder that she was not alone. He shared small gestures of understanding, helping with chores, offering water, or simply sitting in silence beside her. Through these actions, he communicated that he accepted her wholly, scars and all. As days turned into weeks, a subtle shift occurred. The woman began to feel a sense of safety she had not known for years. She realized that showing her scars did not push him away. It drew him closer. She discovered that trust could exist even in the harshest conditions, that vulnerability did not always lead to pain, and that someone could choose to stay even after seeing the hardest parts of her life. Their connection grew beyond words. It was in the shared labor, the quiet moments by the fire, the laughter at small, simple joys, and the mutual respect for each other's boundaries and experiences. The desert, once a place of isolation, had become a space for healing, understanding, and companionship. One night, as the stars glittered across the clear desert sky, she spoke the question that had lingered in her mind for years. "Will you stay if I show all of my scars? If I let you see everything I've been through? Everything that I carry?" The cowboy looked at her, eyes steady, heart calm. "I'm here," he said simply. "I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to hide anything from me." For the Apache woman, those words were more powerful than any promise. They were proof that someone could accept her fully, that her past did not define her worth, and that she could allow herself to be known without fear. A weight lifted from her shoulders, replaced by a quiet sense of relief and hope. In the days that followed, their bond continued to strengthen. She became more comfortable showing him parts of herself she had always kept hidden. He, in turn, became a source of steady support, proving through actions that trust and loyalty could exist even in a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving. The desert, with its endless horizons and shifting sands, became a symbol of their journey. Just as the land had been shaped by wind, water, and time, they too were being shaped by shared experiences, trust, and the willingness to reveal their true selves. Each scar, each story, each quiet moment by the fire was a step toward deeper understanding and connection. By the end of this chapter in their lives, the Apache woman had discovered that showing her scars was not a weakness but a strength. The cowboy had shown her that choosing to stay was an act of courage and commitment. Together, they began to imagine a future where trust, understanding, and compassion could thrive, even in a world that often demanded toughness and guarded hearts. Their days continued with the same rhythm: work, shared stories, quiet reflection, but now there was a sense of intimacy and safety that had not existed before. Each sunrise brought new opportunities to learn from one another, each sunset a chance to reflect on the strength that had carried them through past trials. And in that vast, beautiful desert, they both realized something essential. Scars, whether visible or hidden, were not marks of shame. They were proof of survival, resilience, and courage, and when shared with someone who truly understands, they could become the foundation for trust, connection, and a bond that might endure whatever challenges lay ahead. Life in the desert had settled into a rhythm for the Apache woman and the cowboy. They had grown comfortable in each other's company, sharing stories, chores, and moments of quiet reflection. The woman had begun to trust him deeply, revealing pieces of her past that few had ever known. The cowboy had proven himself dependable, respectful, and patient, earning her quiet admiration. Yet, the desert was never truly predictable. Its beauty often hid dangers, and life in such a harsh landscape demanded constant vigilance. One morning, as the sun climbed over the rocky horizon, a sudden commotion reached the small homestead. Smoke curled in the distance, carried by the wind from a nearby wildfire that had erupted unexpectedly. Flames licked at dry brush, and the heat intensified as the fire spread rapidly across the plain. The cowboy noticed the danger immediately, his years of experience on the range telling him that this fire could quickly reach their home if not addressed. The Apache woman, sensing the urgency, did not hesitate. Together, they began to gather water from nearby sources, creating a makeshift barrier to protect her home and the small garden that had become a source of life and comfort. The heat was intense, and the smoke stung their eyes and lungs, but both moved with determination, knowing that delay could mean disaster. Their combined skills, his strength and experience with physical labor, her knowledge of the land and survival techniques, allowed them to work efficiently under pressure. As they battled the creeping flames, the cowboy saw a side of the Apache woman that left him in awe. She moved with precision and focus, her actions deliberate and confident, each movement informed by a deep understanding of the desert and its hidden dangers. She directed him calmly, showing him where to place water, how to dig small fire breaks, and which paths to use to stay safe while still being effective. Even in the chaos, her calmness grounded him, and he trusted her guidance completely. Hours passed, and the fire continued to threaten their surroundings. Both were exhausted, their clothes and skin covered in soot and sweat. At one point, a burning branch fell dangerously close to the homestead, and the cowboy instinctively shielded the woman, pulling her to safety. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. They looked at each other, breathing heavily, recognizing that they had faced true danger together. That shared experience created a bond deeper than anything they had felt before. After the immediate threat passed, they retreated to a safer distance, surveying the damage and catching their breath. The woman's small garden had suffered, and parts of her home bore the marks of the fire's heat. But both knew that the worst had been avoided. In that quiet moment, away from the flames, they allowed themselves to feel relief, exhaustion, and gratitude all at once. The cowboy placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, silently communicating that they had survived the trial together. This shared experience also highlighted the strength in vulnerability. The Apache woman, who had long carried the burden of self-reliance, realized that letting someone else help did not diminish her resilience, it amplified it. The cowboy, who had often worked alone, understood the value of partnership and the courage it took to rely on another in moments of danger. Together, they had faced the fire and emerged stronger, their trust in each other solidified by the ordeal. In the days following the wildfire, the desert began to heal. And so did their understanding of one another. They repaired the damage to the home and garden. Working side by side, the cowboy learned to follow her lead in areas where her knowledge surpassed his, while she grew confident in allowing him to contribute in ways only he could. Their teamwork was seamless, born of mutual respect and shared experience. During quiet evenings, they would sit together, often in silence, watching the desert transform under the golden glow of the setting sun. The air was still, except for the occasional rustle of small animals or the distant cry of a bird returning to its nest. It was in these moments that the woman reflected on her journey. She realized that showing her scars and allowing someone into her life had not made her vulnerable in the way she had feared it had made her stronger. She had shared her past and witnessed care and acceptance in return, a gift she had long thought impossible. The cowboy, too, found himself changed by the experience. He had faced danger countless times in his life, but none had been quite like this. The fire had tested more than just physical strength. It had tested his courage, patience, and the depth of his commitment to someone else. He recognized that staying meant more than physical presence. It meant choosing to be there, to trust, and to protect without hesitation. As the desert nights grew cooler, they found comfort in simple routines. They tended to the home, shared meals, and spent long hours in conversation. Slowly, the Apache woman began to tell stories of her ancestors, of the lessons they had passed down through generations. She spoke of courage, perseverance, and the wisdom of living in harmony with the land. The cowboy listened intently, fascinated by the depth of her knowledge and the clarity with which she viewed the world. Their conversations often returned to the theme of scars, both visible and invisible. The woman shared moments of pain and loss, while the cowboy recounted experiences that had tested his limits. Through these exchanges, they learned not only about each other, but also about themselves. They discovered the strength in vulnerability and the power of trust, realizing that opening up could create bonds that were stronger than fear or past trauma. One day, while walking through the desert to check the perimeter of the property, the cowboy stumbled upon a small, injured animal, a young fox caught in a trap. He carefully freed it, his hands gentle and steady. The Apache woman watched with admiration, noting the tenderness in his actions. Together, they tended to the animal, demonstrating care, patience, and teamwork. This small act mirrored their relationship, a balance of strength, understanding, and compassion, working together to protect and heal. The challenges they faced, whether from the desert itself or from human conflicts nearby, brought them closer. Each obstacle required cooperation, communication, and trust. They learned to anticipate each other's needs, to support one another without words, and to face danger with shared courage. The cowboy realized that his choice to stay was more than a decision. It was a commitment to someone who had shown him that true strength lies not in facing life alone, but in facing it together. As the season began to change and the desert shifted from the heat of summer to the cooler breezes of early autumn, their connection deepened further. Nights spent around the fire became times of reflection and storytelling. They shared dreams, fears, and hopes for the future. The Apache woman spoke of her desire for a life where she could embrace love and trust without fear, while the cowboy admitted his hope for companionship that went beyond the fleeting connections he had known before. The desert, with its harsh beauty and unpredictable nature, had become the backdrop for a profound transformation. Both had faced personal fears, external dangers, and the challenges of vulnerability. They had discovered that true courage was not just surviving hardships but allowing oneself to connect, to trust, and to care for another deeply. Through all these experiences, their bond became unbreakable. They had faced the fire together literally and figuratively, and emerged stronger, more understanding, and more willing to embrace the complexities of life and love. The cowboy had seen the Apache woman's resilience in action, and she had seen his unwavering commitment. Together, they had proven that trust, courage, and compassion could overcome even the most difficult circumstances. By the end of this chapter in their lives, the desert no longer seemed a place of isolation. It had become a symbol of their shared journey, a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, life could flourish when nurtured with care, respect, and trust. Each scar, each story, and each challenge had contributed to the depth of their connection. The cowboy and the Apache woman had not only survived, they had learned to thrive together, finding strength in each other and in the land that had shaped them. As the night fell, stars spread across the sky like a blanket of light. The fire crackled softly, and the desert's quiet hum surrounded them. They sat together, side by side, reflecting on the dangers they had faced and the bond that had grown from them. In that serene moment, they understood something fundamental. Courage was not just about facing external threats, but about allowing oneself to be vulnerable, to trust, and to love. And in that understanding, they found a new beginning, a promise of companionship and resilience that would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. The desert had settled into its quiet rhythm once more. Days stretched long under the warm sun, and nights fell cool and calm, with stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. For the Apache woman and the cowboy, life had changed. The trials they had faced together, the storm, the wildfire, and the challenges of everyday survival had strengthened their bond. The trust between them was no longer fragile. It was a steady, unspoken understanding that each could rely on the other, no matter what life brought. The Apache woman had begun to accept that showing her scars, both physical and emotional, had not driven the cowboy away. In fact, it had brought them closer. The moments she had feared would expose weakness had revealed strength, resilience, and depth. She realized that vulnerability could be a gift, one that allowed connection to grow and trust to flourish. The cowboy, in turn, had learned the meaning of true loyalty, patience, and care. Staying with her had become more than a choice. It had become a commitment, a recognition that some bonds were worth risking everything for. Morning light fell over the desert as they worked together, repairing the home and the garden after the wildfire's damage. They moved in quiet harmony, each aware of the other's presence, each anticipating needs without words. The woman carried water to the plants she had fought so hard to save, while the cowboy reinforced the fence and cleared debris. The sun rose higher, but the heat felt less oppressive than it once had, as if the challenges they had faced had made them stronger, capable of enduring much more than before. During their work, the Apache woman paused, glancing at the cowboy with a thoughtful expression. "I used to believe that I could only rely on myself," she said quietly. "I thought that trusting someone with my past would be too dangerous. But now, I see that strength is not just surviving alone. Strength is knowing someone will stand with you when the world feels impossible." The cowboy stopped, wiping sweat from his brow, and looked at her with steady eyes. "I'm here," he said simply. "I'm not going anywhere. Whatever comes, we face it together. That's what matters." Those words, though simple, carried the weight of everything they had been through. She felt a wave of relief and gratitude, understanding that he truly meant them. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where fear did not dictate her choices, where love and trust could exist without hesitation. As the days passed, their bond continued to deepen. Even in routine moments, there was an unspoken connection. Sharing meals, tending to the land, or simply sitting quietly by the fire, they found comfort in each other's presence. The desert, which had once felt isolating and harsh, had become a place of healing and reflection. Each sunrise and sunset reminded them of life's beauty and the power of resilience. One evening, they took a walk along a rocky ridge overlooking the desert valley. The sky was painted with soft shades of orange and pink, and the wind carried a gentle coolness. From this vantage point, the world seemed endless, vast and full of possibilities. The Apache woman felt a sense of peace she had rarely known. She realized that revealing her scars, trusting the cowboy, and facing challenges together had brought her to this place, a place of quiet strength and hope. The cowboy stood beside her, taking in the view. He did not speak immediately, allowing her thoughts to settle. Then he said, "Life is full of hard things. But standing here with you, knowing we've faced them together, it feels like anything is possible." She smiled softly, a warmth spreading through her chest. "It's strange," she said, "how life brings people together in the most unexpected ways. I never thought I could let someone see all of me. And yet, here we are." He reached for her hand, a simple gesture that carried a lifetime of unspoken words. She held it firmly, feeling the steady presence of someone who had proven through actions and patience that he would stay. In that quiet moment, they understood that trust and love were built not on grand gestures, but on consistency, understanding, and shared courage. In the weeks that followed, they continued to live and work together, strengthening not only the home and land, but also their connection. Each day brought new lessons, small victories, and moments of reflection. They shared laughter, quiet conversations, and even comfortable silences that spoke more than words ever could. Their lives were no longer defined solely by past scars or past hardships. They were defined by their resilience, partnership, and the promise of a future together. The Apache woman began to see her scars not as marks of shame or pain, but as symbols of endurance and strength. She realized that showing them had not weakened her. It had allowed someone to truly see her and accept her completely. The cowboy, in turn, saw that staying with her, supporting her, and facing life together was more meaningful than any adventure he had experienced alone. He understood that courage was not only about facing danger, but also about choosing to remain, to care, and to trust. One day, as they repaired a section of the fence near the edge of the property, a young coyote appeared nearby. Curious and cautious, the Apache woman and the cowboy watched it silently, admiring its grace and careful movements. It reminded them of the balance in the desert life, coexisting with danger, beauty intertwined with challenge. The moment was simple, yet it carried a profound lesson. Just as the coyote survived through caution and adaptability, they too had grown stronger through resilience, trust, and partnership. Evenings were often spent by the fire, sharing stories of the past and dreams of the future. The Apache woman spoke of her ancestors, of lessons learned from generations of resilience, and of the wisdom carried in scars and experience. The cowboy shared his hopes, ambitions, and moments that had shaped him, revealing parts of himself he had never shown anyone else. Each story, each revelation, strengthened their bond and created a foundation of trust that would endure beyond the desert's challenges. Time passed, and the landscape around them shifted with the seasons. The desert, once seen as a place of isolation and hardship, had become a canvas for growth, healing, and connection. Their home, small and simple, was now filled with warmth, laughter, and the quiet assurance that they were not alone. Together, they had learned that life's beauty was not just in surviving, but in sharing, trusting, and building something meaningful with another person. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of color, the Apache woman turned to the cowboy. "I used to be afraid that no one could accept all of me," she said softly. "But now I see that someone can. And not just accept me, but choose to stay, to be here, no matter what." He smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "I'm here," he said. "I'll always be here. Whatever comes, we face it together." She felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. The scars that had once weighed heavily on her, visible and invisible, were now part of a story that included hope, trust, and love. She realized that strength was not about hiding pain, but about sharing it with someone who truly understands, and choosing to continue, no matter what life brought. In the quiet of the desert night, they sat together, listening to the gentle whispers of the wind and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. The fire crackled softly, illuminating their faces and reflecting the calm contentment in their eyes. There was no rush, no need for grand declarations or dramatic gestures. Their connection was steady, enduring, and built on shared experience, trust, and understanding. As the stars sparkled above, they reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The cowboy had risked everything by staying, proving that courage was not only about facing external danger, but also about choosing to care and remain loyal. The Apache woman had shown her scars, revealing her past and her strength, demonstrating that vulnerability could lead to connection, not loss. Together, they had created something rare and precious, a bond that could endure life's trials and celebrate its joys. The desert, with its vast horizons and ever-changing beauty, became a symbol of their journey. It had tested them, shaped them, and ultimately brought them together. Each challenge they faced, each scar revealed, and each act of trust strengthened their connection and reinforced the lessons they had learned. That courage, compassion, and trust were more powerful than fear, isolation, or past pain. By the end of their story, the Apache woman and the cowboy stood together on the edge of the desert, looking out over the land that had witnessed their growth. They had faced storms, fire, and uncertainty, and they had emerged stronger, wiser, and deeply connected. Their pasts, filled with challenges and scars, had led them to this moment of peace, trust, and shared purpose. In the quiet beauty of the desert, they had discovered a simple truth. Life's hardships were inevitable, but the strength to endure, the courage to trust, and the willingness to love could create bonds that lasted a lifetime. Scars, once feared, had become symbols of resilience. The decision to stay, once uncertain, had become a commitment to a shared journey, and in that understanding, they had found not only each other, but a sense of home, hope, and the promise of a future built together. As the night embraced the desert, the Apache woman and the cowboy remained side by side, their hearts aligned, their pasts accepted, and their future open to all the possibilities that life could offer. Together, they had faced everything and chosen to stay, proving that true connection could flourish even in the harshest landscapes. And in that shared presence, they found peace, courage, and the enduring strength of love.